Hey everybody. A while back I posted an incomplete composition entitled Grove. Since then I've gone ahead and extended it pretty dramatically, about I think maybe 4 or 5 more minutes of music for it. Since I'd already posted a recording of the incomplete version, I thought what I'd do today is play through the new version that goes all the way through to an end, to a nice ending, and then I would go through and do a walkthrough of sort of my process on it, what I was thinking. Additionally, I thought since last time we did the score, this time we would do uh, the piano roll. So without further ado, here's the piece. All right. So that's the new piece. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can bring up Staff Pad here so that we can make some references to the music so that I can draw on it. We're going to try this new format out. So, you may have noticed here at the top, I've had some markers running during the playback. Probably gives you a lot of what I was going to say here, but in terms of thinking about this piece, I do a lot of my process is usually to do a through composed approach. So I begin with material that I've sort of worked on maybe a little bit prior to actually putting any notes down on paper, maybe messing around on a piano or singing something in my head or whatever it is. And then I sort of allow the music to sort of evolve on its own. There's a lot of downsides to that approach. I think that a rigid and masterful approach to form can really give your music a lot of coherence. I try to make up for the incoherence that through composition can sort of tempt you toward by making sure that I have a lot of economy of means. So that begins with the very first melodic ideas usually, and that's what we're seeing here at the beginning. If I switch this over to a few of the staff pad, this is that opening melody. It sort of begins almost in an E minor, E Phrygian kind of feel, but then it quickly, after this G sharp here, definitely transitions back to something that's more A minor. It sounds like this. So that's sort of the first real melody. Obviously, we hear. We don't hear a whole lot other than that melody, but it's sort of the first main idea we're going to base everything around. So some things to think about here when you're putting together your melodic ideas. I find it's really useful at the beginning, somewhere if you can sneak it, to have a very clear statement of your melodic material so that people can hear it on its own without all of the bells and whistles that you're going to add later. A big mistake I see a lot of newer composers use, or younger composers, I guess, inexperienced maybe. It's one that I still make, of course, myself, is to overwrite, especially at the very beginning. And what this can do is it can leave your audience confused because they don't know which part to grab onto. By presenting the melody on its own, often you can give them help, right? Listen to this. This is important. We're going to use this. You're going to hear it again. Once I opened up with that melody, the next thing I wanted to do was have something else. Okay, so we have this transition material. In this piece, I think this is probably the most underutilized material in here. We have this Celeste up here that's popping along on these fifths. And our strings are in fifths. Just easy parallel fifth motion. There's a lovely use of this in John Adams has a piece called On the Transmigration of Souls, and it has some just really beautiful writing for boys choir, and they'll do something that's sort of like that, and I really like that texture, and have since sort of put that into my toolbox as something that can work really well. Obviously, here we're not going to use a lot of chromaticism like you hear in that piece, or maybe not chromaticism, but borrowed tones from other keys. And in a lot of what you're seeing here, we're writing diatonically, so we're not taking a ton of stuff, notes from other keys most of the time. We're just keeping it very diatonic, very in a set key center. So yeah, that's all this is though, is a is sort of fifths and a little texture, just something to contrast that opening idea, because we just bring it right back right here. And we bring it back, I believe, in our English horn. So already it's a little bit different in that we're using a different texture. The winds, the double reed of the English horn. Additionally, I decided to add this texture of sort of violin ostinato up here. And if you look at the music there, it's just this right here. It's just simple intervals, just rocking back and forth. This is the sort of thing that I find staff pad is really useful for, in that staff pad will allow you to do playback of something like that, very, very naturally. It's programmed well enough that it will give you that nice rocking feeling. That can be very difficult to pull off in a VST. I found I have a hard time programming it in by hand, but just being able to write it out here makes a lot of sense and really ends up working. So that's another statement of that melody. That melody, I feel like, has a very sort of mysterious sense to it. And so I thought it was a good one to start with, in the sense that it sort of opens up the possibilities of where we might go with the piece. As we move out of that, we have some transition material, and we have this little bit that starts with D flat, and it sounds like this. It's also the first place that we start to hear the choral writing sort of start to make its appearance. This is mostly just used to move us around in a modulatory fashion later in the piece. In this case, what it's doing is it's allowing us to move upward and start our journey. We're going to move away from that E Phrygian, A minor, A Aeolian, if you will, and we're going to be moving towards an F sharp version of the theme we heard earlier, which is what happens right here at 36. In addition to being in a new key, we're doing a canon. In a canon, for those of you who are not familiar, we overlap the melody on itself. So it's sort of like the traditional row your boat thing. So flute 1 is just playing that melody that we've already heard twice. We've already established it. Offset with it is a second flute, which I think will come in here. Yeah, there it is. Struggling a little with some of the legato there. And the alto flute here, he starts in 37. He's an octave lower. Get that nice hooty. Again, trying to play up the mysterious, otherworldly feel of this. An alto flute, I felt like, was a good choice, in the sense that it's got that really natural hooty. It's not chirpy. Just a beautiful tone. So each of these are just layered on top of each other. So they're sort of talking over each other for this section. And underneath, we've just got an F sharp pedal and a tremolo string with some horn stuff to sort of round out the feeling of it and keep it interesting. So now that we've heard our first theme, our what we'll call A theme, a few times now, it's been about 3 times, it's probably not a good idea to be slamming on it too hard and playing too much of the heck out of it, even though I do think it's a nice melody, if I do say so myself. So what we do here is we now move to a second theme. If you take a look at the actual score here, one of the things that you'll see is something that I tried to very intentionally do was ensure that our strings here just had a lot going on. Not having a lot of static notes. You know, if you look in 50 and 51 there, you see some block chords happening. But even then, I tried to avoid having them be for too long. They transition off one to the other. And there's just always this idea of trying to have something interesting happening. I mean, if you go to 48 and I play just the cello here, let's listen to just the cello at 48. With the basses, you can really hear how that fits into the overall sort of tonal landscape. One of the things I end up saying a lot to composers that are asking for advice is to try to always think of things as independent voices, independent lines that need to internally have their own consistent, natural feel. It would have been very easy. We've got our, let me put on a piano here. We've got our main melody that's just playing. Oh, I'm sorry. I still have the cello soloed. The main melody, which is just. We could just have that melody be on top of block chords if we wanted to. We could just. Sorry, trying to read the chords. And that doesn't sound bad. There's nothing wrong with that. But by taking those chords and trying to write lines that match those chords, you end up with something a lot more interesting. If we just listen to the accompaniment here, which would just be the violas, cellos, and basses, you can hear that there's a sense of overlapping, almost independent melody. In 50 and 51, I think it becomes a little more static, but that's, I think, mostly to contrast with that more active stuff that happened. So always when you're trying to do writing, this is why I'm really a big proponent of, if you can, if you have time, there's not always time if you're a media composer, to write out your string parts and to conceive of your string parts more like this, and think of them as violin, 1, 2, viola, cello, and bass. It gets you to, I think, a much easier place in terms of adding that kind of interest rather than just thinking of everything as these big piano style blocks. I know some composers really like to use, like, say, ensemble patches, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some of the best composers in the world use ensemble patches. And if you do, this is not by no means an attempt to make you feel guilty about doing that. The best ones, though, they're able to achieve this. They're able to achieve this kind of interest while using them. They've trained themselves how to do that. For me, it's more helpful to think of them in their separate pieces and to think of, because that allows me to think of them as separate lines. So this is our B theme that we're moving through here. I mentioned that in 50 and 51, I thought that maybe it was a little bit not enough movement, but I think that's because I wanted to emphasize this violin 2 line here. Just walking up a major scale. Nothing exciting, but you put it inside of a against those two chords, that's a F sharp minor to D major chord. And it just adds that little bit of spice and something to listen to, so there's not just these big pad-like strings that are always there. There's nothing, again, wrong with pad-like strings, especially if that's part of your stylistic process, or your stylistic goals, I should say. But by being able to do both, you get to have the choice, right? Working on being able to have separate voices allows you the choice to add the interest where it makes sense for you. Let's keep going. So, yeah, just another statement of theme B. Here what we do is we add sort of this little counter thing on top of it, and then we move into some transition material. Up here I've called it fragmentary melodic transition. This shows up a lot later, as I'm sure you've noticed, and one of the things that it does is it allows us to have a sort of little motive. It's not really a melody, it's more of a motive that we can use to move from either one key to another or from one section to another. And by being a very recognizable motive, hopefully, right, we can use it as a tool while also maintaining coherence of the piece overall. I mentioned at the beginning that I really am a big fan of and often use, almost exclusively use, through composition, through composed pieces, or what I mostly write. And the hardest thing about that is keeping things together and coherent. And the way that you do that is you try to reuse material as much as possible. And you're going to see that here. I'm a big fan of lazy composers, right? Reuse material. Why are you writing something new? Why are you overwriting that? Go back and grab something from earlier. The trick there is to not make that boring, to not overuse that material, to not repeat yourself too much. So we're just gonna hear, it's just melody B, it's the same thing, it's the exact same string parts, it's just been moved up to B minor. That's what this transition did, it moved us up to B minor. So we play that a couple of times. We use the same fragmentary transition here. And all of these melodies, I should mention, are fairly, I think, pentatonic. A pentatonic, a little minor pentatonic scale, is a wonderful little pitch class from which you can sort of pull out great melodic ideas. It can often feel, if you really get good at it, that the melody is sort of writing itself, and you're just kind of transcribing it. It's really nice. It's a really nice feeling. So, I think 73 and 74 here could use something to make them a little more interesting. That would be a little bit of self-critique. All right, so we return back to melody A. This time we're having some trumpets play it with us. We've also got these sort of big block chords that are moving underneath. So again, it's not that I think big block chords are bad, right? Sometimes they can really support something. It doesn't always need to be that. But again, it's the ability to choose between those things and to not always have to do this. This is really not that interesting from a compositional perspective to just hear. I mean, that's not super interesting. It's not even very good voice leading. There's, depending on your views of parallel fifths. But it works there because it contrasts with something else. So that's why I always really push that idea of not doing this, is that this I see a lot, don't see as much of the other things. Anyway, one of the things I really like about this is the way that trumpet sounds on that low G. Just really love that low G and how that sounds. It's a range of the trumpet I don't normally think of. That's a G below middle C right there, which is pretty low for a trumpet. And you can hear it. You can hear the tone starting to sort of fatten out and almost struggle, right? Like we're definitely in a part of the trumpet's range where we want to be real careful about what we're writing. But giving them a whole note, I think. Now we use this same transition that we heard from earlier, the D flat up to F sharp transition. Bringing back our choir. But this time we're not going to move to the same place. We're going to play theme B in E major. So originally this was definitely a much more almost maybe Dorian minor mode kind of sound. I don't have the music directly in front of me at the moment, but it's the sort of thing that does not sound like this. So in terms of adding interest to a melody, and again, going back to that idea of reuse material, reuse material, reuse material, a really good tool in your tool bag can be take the same melody and move it to a different mode. Somewhere Over the Rainbow is a beautiful, wonderful piece of music or melody, I guess is what I'm thinking of, in major key, right? In just a major mode. What does it sound like in a different mode? In minor, it's absolutely stunning. So I always encourage you to explore your ideas in different modal contexts to see what you can mine out of them. Again, trying to keep long, big pieces of music coherent is really hard. And so you should be kind to yourself by being willing to repeat yourself. Just do something a little different. Just take something that was minor and make it major, or vice versa. Make it Dorian. Change up the harmony, but use the same material so that everything feels like it belongs there. I do a lot of media composition. I work in games and in film, and in those cases, you don't always have the flexibility that somebody who's writing a piece of concert music has to be able to decide even where the general feel of your music is going, right? If the scene is transitioning to something tragic or heartbreaking, you can't be taking a major, happy melody and playing it over that necessarily. I mean, obviously there may be a context where that makes a lot of sense, but with that caveat aside, you may need to be able to take something that is originally meant for a different feel and to modify it in such a way as to use it there. And so, again, switching up your modal approach, especially to melodic ideas, is really, really useful in that sense. So major mode. In my original video on this, I had written a little note to myself that the strings are maybe a little over busy, and you can see that I have not gotten rid of that. This is what this looks like in the score here. It's very busy. We've got triplets and 16th notes and all sorts of weird stuff. So this is, I think, maybe a good example of going a little overboard. So here's what those sound like. Again, I just didn't have the heart to kill this darling. You just totally lose it when that melody's soaring over the top. Can't hear it. I tried lots of different things, tried working with the dynamics, I tried working with the orchestration. Could not really make those really pop out in a way that didn't make the melody overshadow the main melodic idea we were working on. But I like it a lot, so I'm leaving it in there, even though it gets pretty buried. So after we have heard that melody in E major here, we want to transition. At this point, we are 5 minutes into the piece, so we're about halfway through. There's been a lot of transition material that has been spoken, I guess. We've had that little this thing, sorry, I don't have the piano open at the moment, but we had that D flat thing, we had some of those fragmentary melodies. Here I thought it would be worth it, especially since we're now kind of in this major place, to add some new transition material to bring something we hadn't heard before. So that's what happens here in 101. We restate theme B. We change it up, of course. It's a little lower. We play it in, I believe, violas and bassoons help us out here to play that theme again. We lose all of that dun 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 stuff. So we've heard that twice now. So some transition material again at 116. We've heard it before. It's that little motive. And then we just are back to our regular old theme B that we've heard a couple of times so far. The big change here is to alter the texture. Our main line is now a solo violin. We add in some harp accompaniment that's doubling some of the lower string stuff. Mostly using, as I mentioned, instrumentation as the variation here. So we play through that one more time. And then this time we transition to the material that's completely new. Everything up until about now has been fairly similar to the version of this I posted earlier. And now we get into some new stuff that's really genuinely different here at measure 135. And what this comes from is just these little fragmentary ideas that are mostly based upon stuff that we've heard before. Again, economy of means. You're going to hear me say it. I've said it already a bunch of times. I'm going to keep saying it. Wherever you can be a lazy composer. It forces you to actually work a little bit harder sometimes, and it can really enrich the overall texture. Here's kind of one of the main ideas. So that's kind of comes from some of the earlier material, as does this little cello line, which will sound very familiar here in measure 137. Obviously, that's coming from that. We get my piano out here. That's coming from. Need to unsolo. Yada-da-dun-dun. That's theme A. It's just a little chunk of theme A. We just kind of chopped up the very beginning of theme A and made it a little bit more upbeat. Yeah, it's bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum. Trying to develop, right? This is when they talk about development, what development is. Obviously, if you want to hear the best development maybe in all of Western music, just anything by Ludwig, any Beethoven you can find, is possibly overdeveloped most of the time. He's very good about changing those things up. But those are just, again, I'm always trying to give you tools for your toolbox. That's a little tool for your toolbox take apart your melodies. It's sort of like going into a kid's toy and taking out part of it and using just that part, right? And by mixing little pieces of fragments, we get this little orchestral texture that we use as the basis for this new section. Obviously, there's some transition material again. So here what we have is a new theme. This is our what I have labeled theme C. Okay, we first hear it in our horns. Let's go ahead and solo that at 155. Things I hear a lot from one of the comments I leave a lot on music is I encourage you to develop a melody here, and I think that one of the things I often hear in response to that is I don't like to write melodies. How do you write melodies? This is, I think, a good example of melodic construction that I think ultimately succeeds. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, and I think the reason it succeeds is that unlike the sort of through composed approach, it really does have a lot of structure, right? It has a call and a response. And then after that call and response, there is sort of a last part of the melody that then responds to sort of that whole statement. So there's like a antecedent consequent thing, and then there's this. Right? And it has that sense of almost like like poetry, like a stanza. So that's C theme. Let's unsolo the horn. We have a D theme here. This one is fairly underdeveloped and I think a little bit underutilized in the piece, but it's just here to sort of give us a place to go along the fast province. Us repeat C theme again. C theme here is now not just in horns, it's in trumpets, and just listen to the dramatic difference that you get. Again, like earlier, it's a little low for the trumpets, but because they've got the horns backing them up, all they're adding is that spice, that extra little bit of brassiness and a lot of those more accents. We return to the faster texture that we had earlier, and we build up. With just a dramatic sudden drop in texture. Now I do this too much. Everyone always complains that there's too many subito pianos in your work. They're not wrong. I really like it though, and this sounded so good, and the sample of this bell worked so well here. I couldn't kill it. So that's what we do here, and we just use that sort of sudden stop, that sudden lone bell to now bring back this trumpet material. Or sorry, not this trumpet material. This material with a trumpet cannon above it. There's C theme with its cannons that overlap and tuck. just have some little sort of chords with a few. I think there's a couple of notes from outside the key here just to kind of spice things up. And we're into the ending, which is just the A theme with a double pedal. There's a pedal on top and a pedal below it. I was on VI Control the other day and somebody had asked, how do I don't know what to do, I got this piece, I don't know how to finish it. Something that's really helpful for finishing is return to where you started at the end. It helps really snap everything into a coherent and really just sensible framework, right? We already heard this, we heard it in these exact same pitches, in this exact same key at the very beginning of the piece. So to bring it back at the end here really just puts a little bow on everything and makes it all work together. So that's sort of another example of economy of means, right? Like, don't write an ending. You've already got an ending. It was the beginning, right? How can you modify that beginning to now be an ending? It's something that I find very useful, and it's really lovely to have everything sort of go full circle and come back. Now, you can overdo that. This is like the Subito piano thing earlier, probably something that I might do a little too much, but it's very effective, and that's really what counts. So that's a little tip. And so yeah, that's a walkthrough just like what that is and how that piece works. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I would love to try to answer any questions you have or to help you out if you're struggling with a piece of music. I don't really view this YouTube channel as my full-time job, but it's certainly something that I like to keep around here because it seems like some people at least have found some value of it, some value out of it. That's just what I'm trying to do is be helpful if possible. So hopefully there was something helpful for you, some ideas you can try in your own work. Please, tag me in a comment somewhere and like show me your stuff. I love to comment on other people's work as well. Anyway, thanks for staying to the end, and yeah, we'll see you around.